The sound of their laughter cut through me like glass. There I was again, pressed against the cold hallway wall, watching my family celebrate without me. The dining room glowed with warm light, crystal glasses catching the chandelier's reflection. And there they sat, Mum, Dad, Emma, and her husband David. 4 chairs, 4 plates, 4 people who mattered. I didn't even exist in their world. "Emma, darling, tell us more about the Morrison case," Dad urged, his voice filled with the pride I'd never heard directed at me. My sister's perfectly styled blonde hair caught the light as she launched into another story about her successful law career, her designer dress probably costing more than my entire wardrobe. The irony wasn't lost on me. Here I was, 28 years old, hiding in shadows in my own home like some kind of criminal. My bare feet were getting cold against the hardwood floor, but I couldn't move. I was transfixed by this scene I'd witnessed 1,000 times before. My family being a family without me. Mum hung on every word, her eyes sparkling with maternal pride. "I always knew you'd be something special," she gushed, refilling Emma's wineglass with the expensive Bordeaux they saved for special occasions. The same wine they'd never offered me, the same attention they'd never given me, the same love they'd never shown me. "Remember when Emma was little and she'd play lawyer with her dolls?" Mum continued, her voice warm with nostalgia. "She'd set up these elaborate courtroom scenes in the living room. I remembered those days too, but from a different angle. I remembered being 5 years old, begging to play along, only to be told I was too little or too disruptive. I remembered setting up my own art studio in the basement, painting pictures of families that looked happy, families where everyone belonged, pictures that ended up in the trash when Mum cleaned out my room. "Where's Anna tonight?" David asked casually, cutting into Mum's famous herb-crusted roast, the one she claimed was too much work whenever I begged for it on my birthday. The question hung in the air for exactly 3 seconds before Mum's laugh filled the silence. Sharp, dismissive, like she was waving away a mosquito. "Oh, you know Anna, probably sulking in her room again. She gets these moods when she doesn't get her way." Sulking. The word hit me like a physical blow. 28 years of being forgotten, overlooked, treated like an inconvenience, and they reduced my pain to sulking. 28 years of begging for scraps of their attention, and they called it having moods. But it was Dad's response that really shattered something inside me. "She'll come around when she's ready to be part of this family," he said, not even looking up from his plate. His voice carried that tone, the one that suggested I was somehow defective, broken, failing to meet some standard I'd never been told about. Ready to be a part of the family. I'd been ready my entire life. I'd been standing at the door of their hearts since I could walk, desperately trying to earn the love they showered on Emma without her even trying. I'd spent my childhood, my teenage years, my entire adult life trying to solve the puzzle of why I wasn't enough. Standing there in that hallway, invisible as always, I realized something that changed everything. I was done begging for love from people who would never give it. But here's what they didn't know about me. What they'd never bothered to learn in 28 years of ignoring me. I wasn't just the artistic daughter they dismissed. I wasn't just the disappointment who couldn't live up to Emma's golden standard. I was smart, dangerously smart. And I'd been watching them my entire life, learning their weaknesses, understanding exactly what mattered to them most. Their reputation, their precious social standing, their perfect family image. Emma continued her story, gesturing with manicured hands that had never known real work, talking about how she'd impressed some senior partner at her firm. He said my presentation was the most compelling he'd seen in years, she bragged, her voice carrying that familiar tone of superiority. Mum and Dad ate it up like she was performing Shakespeare, their faces glowing with vicarious pride. They leaned forward, asked follow-up questions, celebrated her smallest victories like they were Olympic gold medals. I thought about every birthday they'd forgotten, every achievement they'd ignored, every time Emma got the bigger room, the better gifts, the unconditional love that should have been mine too. I remembered being 8 years old, crying outside this same dining room while they celebrated Emma's high school graduation without inviting me. I'd made a card for her, spent hours drawing and colouring it, only to have it dismissed as sweet, but not appropriate for such a grown-up event. I remembered being 15, watching through tears as they helped Emma pick out her prom dress. A beautiful blue gown that cost more than most people's rent, while dismissing my art scholarship as just a hobby that won't pay the bills. I remembered being 25 when Emma announced her engagement, and they threw her a party that cost more than my entire education. When I'd asked why they never celebrated my college graduation, Dad had actually laughed and said, "Art degrees don't really count, sweetheart. When you get a real job, we'll celebrate." A real job. As if the illustrations I'd been selling, the freelance work I'd been doing, the small but growing reputation I'd been building meant nothing because it wasn't law or medicine or whatever they considered respectable, but they had no idea what was coming. You see, while they'd been busy worshipping Emma, I'd been quietly building something they couldn't even comprehend. My worthless art degree had led me to connections they'd never imagined. My years of being ignored had taught me to observe, to plan, to think 3 steps ahead of everyone else. And I'd discovered something about Emma that would destroy everything they held dear. It had been an accident, really. I'd been picking up some supplies from a print shop downtown when I saw her. My perfect sister Emma, the golden child, the one who could do no wrong, coming out of a seedy motel with a man who definitely wasn't her husband David. I'd followed them, my artistic eye automatically cataloguing details, my photographer's instincts kicking in. The way she laughed at his jokes, touched his arm, looked at him with an intensity she'd never shown David. The way he handed her an envelope thick with cash. The way she counted it before tucking it into her designer purse. My sister, the successful lawyer, the family pride, the woman who could do no wrong, was having an affair. And from what I'd observed over several weeks of careful watching, it wasn't just any affair. It was an affair with a married judge whose cases she'd been winning at an alarming rate. But I wasn't going to use it. Not yet. First, I was going to disappear. Completely. Let them have their perfect family of 4. Let them enjoy their dinners without the sulking daughter bringing down the mood. Let them forget I ever existed, which wouldn't be hard for them. I was going to take the money I'd been saving, the portfolio I'd been building, and I was going to vanish into the night like I'd never existed at all. But when I came back, when I returned with a name they couldn't ignore, with power they couldn't dismiss, with success that would make Emma's achievements look like finger painting, that's when they'd remember what they'd thrown away. I turned away from the dining room, my bare feet silent on the hardwood floor. In my room, I opened my laptop and began typing. My resignation letter from the small design firm where I'd been working. My goodbye to this life, my first step towards becoming someone who mattered. They wanted me gone? Perfect. But they had no idea that the invisible daughter they were so eager to forget was about to become someone they'd never be able to ignore again. The real Anna was about to be born, and she was going to be magnificent. As I typed, I could still hear their voices drifting up from the dining room, still celebrating Emma, still living their perfect life without me. But for the first time in 28 years, I wasn't crying, I wasn't begging, I wasn't breaking, I was planning. And when I was done, when I'd built something so beautiful and powerful that it would make their precious reputation look like a house of cards, that's when the real show would begin. The clock on my nightstand read 11:47 p.m. when I finally finished typing. 3 resignation letters, a detailed plan, and a list of contacts who'd been waiting for me to take the leap. My fingers trembled slightly as I hit send on the email that would change everything. By morning, I'd be gone. I packed, just the essentials, my art supplies, and the evidence I'd collected about Emma's little secret. The photos, the recordings, the paper trail I'd been documenting for months. Insurance, I told myself, just in case. As I zipped up my suitcase, I heard them finally heading to bed. Dad's heavy footsteps on the stairs, Mum's voice reminding Emma to drive safely, Emma's laughter echoing through the house one last time. None of them checked on me. None of them said goodnight. It was perfect. I slipped out through the back door at 3 a.m., my car keys silent in my hand. The house that had never felt like home looked different in the darkness, smaller, less imposing, almost pathetic. As I drove away, I didn't look back. There was nothing behind me worth seeing. But ahead was everything I'd been denied my entire life. Power, recognition, a name that would burn on their tongues. They'd thrown me away like garbage, but they had no idea they'd just discarded a diamond. And diamonds, when cut properly, become the sharpest things in the world. 3 months later, when my face appeared on the cover of Art and Design magazine as the year's most promising new talent, when my gallery opening in New York attracted celebrities and critics from around the world, when my name started appearing in newspapers and blogs, that's when they'd realised their mistake. But by then, it would be far too late to fix what they'd broken. The invisible daughter was about to become unforgettable. And this time, I wasn't asking for permission to exist. I was taking it. 6 months. That's how long it took for them to notice I was gone. I was sitting in my cramped studio apartment in Brooklyn, paint still wet on my latest canvas, when my phone buzzed with a text from Mum. Not a call, a text. Even in their panic, I still wasn't worth a real conversation. "Anna, where are you? We need to talk." I stared at those 8 words for a full minute before laughing out loud. The sound echoed off the bare walls of my tiny space, mingling with the smell of turpentine and the faint hum of the city below. We need to talk. Not, "We're worried about you," or "We miss you," or "We're sorry." Just business. Always business with them. But here's what they didn't know. While they'd been enjoying their perfect family dinners for half a year, I'd been building an empire. My first breakthrough came 3 weeks after I'd arrived in New York. I'd been working 16-hour days, sleeping on a friend's couch, living off ramen and determination. The city was brutal, unforgiving, everything I'd expected and more. But it was also honest. In New York, nobody cared about your family name or your past. They only cared about what you could produce. I'd started small, selling sketches on the street corners of Soho, networking at dive bar art shows, hustling for every opportunity. My hands were permanently stained with paint, my clothes smelled like coffee and exhaustion, but I was alive in a way I'd never been before. That's when I met Victoria Chen. Victoria was everything I'd dreamed of becoming. Successful, respected, feared in all the right circles. She owned the most exclusive gallery in Manhattan, the kind of place where careers were made with a single exhibition. Her gallery, the Obsidian, was legendary. Artists would kill for a chance to show there. I'd been trying to get her attention for weeks, showing up at events, networking like my life depended on it. She was intimidating in the way only truly powerful women can be. Tall, elegant, with silver hair that she wore like a crown, and eyes that could dissect your soul in seconds. She dressed in black exclusively, moved through rooms like she owned them, and spoke in a voice that made people lean in to listen. When she finally agreed to meet me at a coffee shop in Soho, I thought I'd have 5 minutes to make my pitch. I'd prepared a speech, rehearsed it 100 times, brought my best pieces in a portfolio that I'd spent my last $50 to buy. Instead, she took one look at my work and said 5 words that changed everything. "I want to represent you." I nearly dropped my coffee. "I am sorry, what?" "You heard me." She studied my paintings with the intensity of a surgeon examining a patient. These aren't just good, Anna, they're extraordinary. But more than that, they're honest, raw. I can see the pain in every brushstroke, but also the intelligence, the calculation. She was right. Every piece I'd created since leaving home had been infused with 28 years of rage, rejection, and hunger for something more. My paintings weren't just art. They were declarations of war painted in blues and greys and angry reds. "You're angry," she continued, her dark eyes gleaming with something that looked almost predatory. "Good. Angry artists make the best art, but you're also calculating. I can see it in your technique. Every colour choice, every composition is deliberate. You're not just expressing emotion, you're weaponizing it." She leaned back in her chair, studying me like I was one of my own paintings. "Tell me about your family." The question caught me off guard. My family? The source of all this beautiful rage. I need to understand what created you. So I told her, not everything, not yet, but enough. About being invisible, about Emma's perfection, about dinners I was never invited to, and achievements that were never celebrated. Victoria listened without interrupting, occasionally nodding, taking notes on her phone. "Perfect," she said when I finished. "Absolutely perfect. Do you know what you are, Anna?" I shook my head. "You're a phoenix, burned, forgotten, left for dead, and rising from the ashes more powerful than before. That's your story. That's what's going to make you famous." Famous. The word sent electricity through my veins. I'd dreamed of being famous, but never believed it was possible. Not for someone like me. "I have a proposal," Victoria continued. "I'm launching a new exhibition in 6 months called Invisible Voices. It's about artists who've been overlooked, forgotten, dismissed by society. I want you to be the centerpiece. The centerpiece, not a side note, not an afterthought, not the forgotten daughter hiding in the shadows. The centerpiece of a major exhibition at the most prestigious gallery in Manhattan." Within a week, Victoria had arranged everything. A proper studio space in a converted warehouse in Brooklyn, connections with collectors who had more money than some small countries, interviews with art bloggers who were hungry for fresh talent. She introduced me to photographers who understood my vision, critics who appreciated my technique, buyers who had excellent instincts for what would be valuable. But the most important introduction was to someone named Alexander Rivers. Alexander was everything I'd never known I wanted. Brilliant, successful, dangerous in a way that made my pulse quicken. He was a tech entrepreneur who'd sold his company for 8 figures and now invested in artists he believed in. He was also devastatingly handsome, with dark hair and eyes that seemed to see right through every wall I'd ever built. "I've been following your work," he said when Victoria introduced us at a gallery opening in Chelsea. His voice was smooth, confident, the kind of voice that was used to being listened to. "You have something most artists spend their entire careers searching for. Which is purpose, direction, the kind of controlled fury that creates masterpieces." He studied me with the same intensity Victoria had, but there was something warmer in his gaze. "You're not painting pictures, Anna. You're painting manifestos." We talked for hours that night, about art, about ambition, about the hunger that drives some people to greatness while others settle for mediocrity. He understood me in a way my family never had, never could. He saw the fire in me, and instead of trying to dim it, he wanted to feed it. "You know what I find fascinating about you?" he said as we walked through the empty streets at 2 a.m. "You're not trying to become someone new. You're finally becoming who you were always meant to be." Alexander became my anchor in this new world. Not just financially, though his investment allowed me to focus entirely on my art without worrying about rent or food, but emotionally. He believed in me with a ferocity that was almost frightening. When I doubted myself, when the old insecurities crept in, he was there to remind me of my worth. "They threw away a diamond," he told me one night as I worked on a particularly challenging piece. "But they have no idea that diamonds are formed under pressure. 28 years of pressure, Anna. You're about to shine brighter than they ever imagined possible." But Alexander was more than just a supporter. He was strategic, calculating, ruthless when necessary. He understood power in a way that reminded me of myself, the way you learn to think when you've been underestimated your entire life. "Your family thinks they can ignore you," he said one evening as we reviewed my latest work. "But ignoring someone and making them disappear are two different things. You're about to become impossible to ignore." The exhibition was scheduled for December, exactly 1 year after I'd left home. Victoria orchestrated everything like a military campaign. Press releases sent to every major art publication, social media teasers that had influencers speculating about my identity, exclusive previews for collectors who could afford to buy pieces sight unseen. She positioned me as the discovery of the decade, the artist who would define a new movement. But it was Alexander who suggested the pièce de résistance. "You need something that will make them pay attention," he said as we reviewed the planned layout in Victoria's office. "Something that will force your family to confront what they lost." That's when I decided to paint them. Not a loving family portrait, something darker, more honest. A massive canvas 8 feet by 6 feet, showing a family dinner from the perspective of the excluded observer. The table glowing with warmth and light, 4 figures laughing and celebrating, their faces slightly blurred but recognizable to anyone who knew them. And in the doorway, a shadow, barely visible, ghost-like, yearning. I called it the invisible daughter. It took me 3 months to complete, working sometimes 18 hours a day. Every brushstroke was infused with memory, with pain, with the crystal clear understanding of what I'd survived. When it was finished, even Alexander was speechless. "It's devastating," he whispered, staring at the canvas. "Beautiful and devastating and perfect. When they see this, they'll understand," I finished. But I wasn't done. Oh no, I was just getting started. Because while I'd been building my new life, I'd also been watching theirs fall apart. Emma's affair with Judge Harrison had gotten messier. The private investigator I'd hired, Alexander's idea, and worth every penny, had documented everything. She'd been winning too many cases, getting noticed by the wrong people, asking for more money. The judge was getting nervous, threatening to end things. And Emma, spoiled Emma, who'd never been denied anything in her entire life, wasn't handling the rejection well. She was spiraling, and she didn't even know it yet. Neither did my parents, who were still bragging about their perfect daughter to anyone who would listen. But they were all about to learn a very important lesson about the daughter they'd discarded. The week before my exhibition opened, I decided it was time to come home. Not permanently, never permanently. But I needed to see their faces when they realised what they'd lost. I needed to watch them understand that their invisible daughter had become someone they couldn't ignore. I booked a room at the Ritz-Carlton downtown, bought a dress that cost more than they'd ever spent on me in a single year, and sent them an invitation to my gallery opening. Not personally. Through Victoria's assistant, on official gallery letterhead, like they were strangers, which in every way that mattered they were. And in 3 days, when they walked into that gallery and saw what their discarded daughter had become, the real revenge would finally begin. The gallery opening was packed with the kind of people my parents only read about in magazines. I watched from the VIP balcony as Manhattan's elite moved through the obsidian like elegant predators, their champagne glasses catching the carefully positioned lights. Art critics from the Times, collectors whose single purchases could fund small museums, celebrities who treated gallery openings like red carpet events. The energy was electric, intoxicating, and at the centre of it all hung the invisible daughter. People gathered around it in clusters, pointing, whispering, taking photos despite the no photography signs. I could see the recognition in their faces, the universal understanding of what it meant to be overlooked, forgotten, dismissed. But more than that, I could see the power in it, the way it commanded attention, demanded to be seen, just like I had always wanted to be. Nervous? Alexander appeared beside me, looking devastating in his tailored black suit. He handed me a glass of champagne, not the cheap stuff they served downstairs, but Dom Perignon, 1996, that Victoria kept for special occasions. Terrified, I admitted, watching the crowd below. What if they don't show up? They'll show up. His voice carried absolute certainty. Trust me, Anna, people like your parents can't resist an opportunity to insert themselves into something exclusive. The question is whether they'll recognise what they're looking at. At 8:17 p.m, exactly 17 minutes after the official opening, I saw them. Dad entered first, his silver hair perfectly styled, wearing the navy suit he reserved for important occasions. Mum followed, elegant in a black dress that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. Behind them came Emma and David, Emma's blonde hair swept into a perfect chignon, her red dress hugging her figure like it was painted on. They looked exactly like what they were, wealthy, sophisticated, completely at home among New York's cultural elite. But I could see the slight hesitation in their movements, the way they surveyed the room like they were calculating their place in the hierarchy. They hadn't connected the dots yet. To them, this was just another gallery opening, another chance to see and be seen. They had no idea they were walking into their own reckoning. "Showtime," Alexander murmured, squeezing my hand. I made my way down the spiral staircase, my emerald green dress flowing behind me like liquid silk. I'd chosen it specifically for this moment. Bold, expensive, impossible to ignore. My hair was longer now, styled in waves that caught the light, and the makeup artist Victoria had hired had turned me into someone who looked like she belonged on magazine covers. I was no longer Anna the forgotten daughter. I was A. Rivers, the artist everyone was talking about. The first person to spot me was David. His eyes widened in recognition, then confusion, then something that looked almost like fear. He nudged Emma, who turned and nearly dropped her champagne glass. "Anna?" She said my name like she was testing whether it was real. "What are you doing here?" The question was so perfectly Emma, self-centered, oblivious to anything that didn't revolve around her. She genuinely couldn't understand why I would be at an exclusive Manhattan gallery opening. "I'm here for the artist," I said, smiling the kind of smile I'd learned from watching Victoria negotiate with difficult clients. Cool, confident, revealing nothing. "Oh." Emma's relief was visible. "Well, it's interesting work. Very dark. The centerpiece is particularly disturbing." Disturbing. She was standing 20 feet away from a painting of her own family's cruelty, and calling it disturbing without understanding what she was looking at. "Yes," I agreed. "The invisible daughter piece. It's quite powerful, don't you think?" Before Emma could respond, Mum and Dad approached. Mum's face had that forced brightness she wore when she was uncomfortable, but trying to maintain social graces. "Anna, darling!" She air-kissed me like we were old friends who'd lost touch, not family members she'd ignored for a year. "You look wonderful. So sophisticated. What brings you to New York?" "I live here now," I said simply. Dad's eyebrows rose. "Live here? What do you do for work?" The question was loaded with all his old dismissiveness. He was already preparing to be disappointed, to classify whatever I said as another of Anna's impractical pursuits. "I'm an artist," I said, watching his face carefully. "In fact, I'm showing some pieces tonight." "How nice!" Mum said in the tone she used for things that weren't nice at all. Which pieces? I gestured toward the invisible daughter. That one, for starters. They turned to look at it again, and I watched the exact moment recognition dawned. Dad's face went pale. Mum's hand flew to her throat. Emma's mouth opened and closed like she was trying to speak but couldn't find words. You painted us, Emma whispered. I painted the truth, I corrected. Anna? Dad's voice carried a warning tone, the same one he'd used when I was a child and had done something that embarrassed him. This is inappropriate. Is it? Victoria Chen appeared beside us like she'd materialised from shadow, her presence immediately commanding attention. I'm Victoria Chen, owner of this gallery, and you must be Anna's family. The way she said family made it sound like something distasteful she'd found on her shoe. We are, Mum managed, clearly recognising Victoria's name and status. It's lovely to meet you, though I have to say we're a bit surprised by the subject matter of Anna's work. Art is meant to provoke, Victoria replied smoothly. And Anna's work has certainly done that. Would you like to know what the critics are saying about the invisible daughter? She didn't wait for an answer. The Times called it a devastating examination of familial neglect that speaks to anyone who has ever felt unseen. The Post described it as brutally honest and impossible to ignore. And my personal favourite from Art Forum, A. Rivers has created something that transcends art and becomes archaeology, excavating the pain of invisible children everywhere. With each quote, I watched my family shrink a little more. They were beginning to understand that this wasn't just Anna's little art hobby anymore. This was serious. This was public. This was their dirty laundry displayed in the most prestigious gallery in Manhattan for everyone to see. How much? Dad asked suddenly. I'm sorry? Victoria raised an eyebrow. How much for the painting? I'd like to buy it. The offer was so perfectly Dad, thinking he could solve any problem by throwing money at it. Buy the painting, hide the evidence, pretend it never happened. Victoria's smile was razor sharp. I'm afraid it's not for sale. It's been acquired by the Museum of Modern Art for their permanent collection. The blood drained from Dad's face. MoMA. Their family's shame was going to hang in one of the most famous museums in the world forever. There has to be something we can do, Mum said desperately. This is our private family business. Actually, I said, my voice cutting through their panic like a blade, it's my private family business, and I can share it however I choose. Anna, please. Emma stepped forward, her voice taking on the pleading tone she'd perfected as a child. This will hurt all of us. Think about what you're doing. I am thinking about it, I replied. I'm thinking about 28 years of being invisible. I'm thinking about every dinner I wasn't invited to, every achievement you dismissed, every moment you made me feel like I didn't matter. We never meant, Mum started. You never meant to get caught, I finished. There's a difference. The crowd around us was beginning to notice the tension. I could see phones being discreetly raised, social media posts being composed. By tomorrow, this confrontation would be trending. My family's perfect image, their carefully constructed reputation, was crumbling in real time. But I wasn't done, not even close. Actually, I said, reaching into my purse and pulling out a thick manila envelope, since we're all here together, there's something else we need to discuss. Emma's face went white. She knew. Somehow, she knew what was in that envelope. What is that? David asked, his voice strained. Evidence, I said simply. Photos, financial records, hotel receipts. Everything documenting Emma's affair with Judge Harrison, including the cash payments she's been receiving in exchange for case information. The silence that followed was deafening. Even the ambient noise of the gallery seemed to fade away as my words sank in. "You're lying," Emma whispered, but her voice shook. "Am I?" I opened the envelope and pulled out a photograph. Emma and Judge Harrison leaving the Meridian Hotel, his hand on her back, her face turned up to his with obvious intimacy. This was taken 3 months ago. There are 17 more just like it. David stared at the photo like it was a snake that might bite him. Mum looked like she was going to be sick. Dad's face had gone from pale to red, his hands clenched into fists. "Emma?" David's voice was barely a whisper. "Tell me this isn't real." But Emma couldn't speak. She stood frozen, her perfect facade finally cracking, revealing the hollow, selfish person underneath. "The best part," I continued, my voice conversational, like I was discussing the weather, "is that Judge Harrison is getting nervous. He wants to end things, but Emma's been threatening to expose their arrangement unless he keeps paying her. Extortion is such an ugly word, don't you think?" "Stop!" Dad's voice was a growl. "Stop this right now." "Or what?" I turned to face him fully. "You'll send me to my room? Exclude me from dinner? Forget I exist? Too late, Dad. You already played all of those cards." The crowd around us was openly staring now. Victoria stood beside me like a silent guardian angel, while Alexander watched from across the room with obvious pride. "What do you want?" Mum asked desperately. I smiled, the same cold smile I'd learned from watching Emma manipulate people for years. "I want you to remember this moment. I want you to remember that the daughter you threw away became someone you can't ignore. And I want you to live with the knowledge that everything you built, everything you're proud of, can disappear just as easily as you made me disappear." I tucked the photos back into the envelope and handed it to Emma. "Keep these," I said. "Consider them a reminder of what happens when you underestimate invisible daughters." As they stood there, broken and exposed in front of Manhattan's elite, I realized something beautiful. I didn't need their love anymore. I didn't need their approval or their acknowledgement. I had something infinitely more powerful. I had my name, my talent, and my truth, and that was enough. 3 months later, I was standing in the penthouse office of Harrison and Associates, waiting for my appointment with Judge Harrison himself. But not for the reason anyone would expect. After the gallery opening, everything had unravelled exactly as I'd planned. The photos of Emma's affair had leaked within hours, not from me, but from some helpful soul at the gallery who'd overheard our conversation and decided the story was too juicy to keep quiet. By morning, it was front-page news in the society section. Emma's law firm had launched an immediate investigation. David had filed for divorce, taking half of everything she'd worked for. Judge Harrison had been suspended pending a federal investigation into corruption charges. And my parents? They'd retreated to their house like wounded animals, their perfect family image destroyed, their social standing in ruins. But as I sat in that expensive leather chair, looking out at the Manhattan skyline, I realized something that changed everything. I wasn't here for more revenge. I was here because Judge Harrison had something I needed. "Miss Rivers," his secretary announced through the intercom, "Judge Harrison will see you now." I walked into his office expecting to see a broken man. After all, his career was over, his reputation destroyed, his marriage hanging by a thread. But the man who stood behind the massive mahogany desk looked remarkably composed. "Miss Rivers," he said, gesturing to the chair across from his desk. "Or should I say Miss Thompson? I believe that's your real name." "Anna Thompson doesn't exist anymore," I replied, settling into the chair with the grace Alexander had taught me. She was weak, invisible, forgettable, whereas A. Rivers is anything but. He poured himself a scotch from a crystal decanter, not offering me one. His hands were steady. "Congratulations on your exhibition." I hear it's been quite the success. Thank you. Though I assume you didn't ask me here to discuss my art career. Judge Harrison smiled, and for the first time, I understood why Emma had been attracted to him. There was something predatory about him, dangerous in a way that was almost magnetic. You're right. I asked you here because we have unfinished business. Do we? Your sister was small-time, Miss Rivers. Greedy, yes. Useful, certainly, but small-time. She thought she was playing chess when she was barely managing checkers. I kept my expression neutral, though my pulse quickened. I'm not sure what you're implying. I'm implying that someone with your talents might be interested in a more sophisticated arrangement. The offer hung in the air between us like smoke. I could see where this was going, and it both thrilled and terrified me. You see, he continued, walking around his desk to lean against it, my little arrangement with Emma was profitable, but limited. She could influence small cases, minor settlements. But you're an artist. You understand aesthetics, composition, the way people see things. What exactly are you proposing? Art forgery is a billion-dollar business, Miss Rivers, and I happen to know several collectors who are more concerned with impressing their friends than with authenticity. My blood turned to ice. He wasn't just corrupt, he was offering to make me part of it. You want me to forge paintings? I want you to create masterpieces. Who's to say whether a Picasso sketch you create in your studio is any less valuable than one he created in his? Art is about emotion, about what people believe they're seeing. And you, my dear, are very good at making people see what you want them to see. For a moment, I was speechless. This man had just offered me everything I'd thought I wanted. Unlimited money, prestige, the chance to be surrounded by the greatest art in the world. And all I had to do was become exactly like Emma. Think about it, he continued, misreading my silence for consideration. Your family threw you away because they thought you were worthless. Imagine their faces when they realize you're worth more than all of them combined. That's when I started laughing. Not the polite laugh I'd perfected for gallery openings, but the deep, genuine laughter of someone who just realized the most incredible joke. You think this is about money? I managed between laughs. You think I destroyed my family's reputation because I wanted to get rich? His confident expression faltered. Isn't it? I stood up, smoothing my dress, and walked to the window. The city spread out below us like a glittering promise, full of possibilities and dreams. Judge Harrison, I said, turning back to face him, you've made one crucial mistake. Which is? You assume I'm like Emma. Greedy, corrupt, willing to sell my soul for the right price. I pulled out my phone and tapped the screen. But the truth is, I've been recording this entire conversation. The colour drained from his face. You can't what? Turn you in? Expose another corrupt official? Add to the federal case against you? I walked toward his desk, my heels clicking on the marble floor. Actually, that's exactly what I can do. You little... Careful, I interrupted. Remember who you're talking to. I'm not the invisible daughter anymore. I'm the woman who destroyed her own family's reputation in a single night. Do you really want to test what I'm capable of? He sank into his chair, defeated. What do you want? I want you to understand something that Emma never did. This was never about money or power or revenge. This was about truth. I placed a business card on his desk. That's the number for FBI agent Sarah Chen, Victoria's cousin, actually. Funny how small the world is. She's been investigating art forgery rings for years, and she's very interested in meeting you. Judge Harrison stared at the card like it was a death sentence. You see, Judge Harrison, when I decided to destroy my family, I didn't just plan their downfall, I planned my own rise. And that rise was always going to be legitimate, honest, everything they never were. I walked toward the door, then paused. Oh, and Judge Harrison? When Agent Chen asks you about your art collection, I'd be very honest. She already knows about the fake Monet in your study. I may not be a forger, but I know one when I see one. His sharp intake of breath told me everything I needed to know. I left his office feeling lighter than I had in months. The recording was already uploaded to the secure server Alexander had set up, copies sent to Agent Chen, the FBI, and 3 major news outlets. By tomorrow, Judge Harrison's downfall would be complete. But as I walked through the lobby of his building, my phone rang. "Anna!" It was Mum's voice, shaky and desperate. "Anna, please, we need to talk." "I'm listening." "Not over the phone. Can you come home? Please." I almost laughed. After everything, they still thought of that house as my home. "I will be there in an hour." The house looked smaller than I remembered, less imposing. The perfectly manicured lawn, the spotless driveway, the elegant facade that had once seemed so unattainable. It all looked ordinary now. I found them in the living room. Mum and Dad sat on the couch like they were posing for a funeral photo. Emma was nowhere to be seen. "Where's Emma?" I asked. "She's gone," Dad said heavily. "David took everything in the divorce. Her law firm fired her. She moved back in with us for a while, but what?" "She blamed you for everything," Mum whispered. "She said if you hadn't interfered, she could have handled it. She said you destroyed her life out of jealousy." I sat down across from them, studying their faces. They looked older, worn down by months of scandal and shame. "And what do you think?" Dad was quiet for a long moment. "I think we failed you. I think we failed you so badly that you felt like destroying us was your only option." "We're sorry, Anna," Mum added, tears streaming down her face. "We're so sorry. We loved you. We didn't know how to show it." "You didn't love me," I said quietly. "You loved the idea of having another daughter to show off like Emma. When I didn't fit that mold, you just forgot I existed." "We want to make it right," Dad said desperately. "Whatever it takes. We want our daughter back." I looked at them for a long moment. These people who had shaped me through their neglect, who had created the woman I'd become through their indifference. "I'm not your daughter," I said finally. "I'm A. Rivers. I'm an artist with a gallery in Manhattan and a career that's just beginning. I'm someone who matters, someone who can't be ignored or forgotten." "Anna, please." "But," I continued, holding up a hand to silence Mum's plea, "A. Rivers is generous. She believes in second chances, in redemption, in the possibility that people can change." Hope flickered in their eyes. "So, here's what's going to happen. You're going to sell this house and use the money to start a foundation for children in foster care. Kids who've been forgotten, overlooked, thrown away. You're going to spend the rest of your lives making sure other children don't feel invisible the way I did." "We'll do it," Dad said immediately. "Whatever you want. And in return? In return, maybe someday, when you've proven that you understand what love actually means, we can have dinner together. A real dinner, where everyone at the table matters." I stood up and walked toward the door. "Anna," Mum called after me, Will you ever forgive us?" I paused, my hand on the doorknob. "Ask me again in 5 years, when you've spent some time learning what it feels like to fight for children nobody else cares about, when you understand what you threw away." As I walked to my car, I felt something I'd never experienced before in this place. Peace. My phone buzzed with a text from Alexander. "Gallery opening in Paris next month. They want to feature your new series. Are you ready to conquer Europe?" I smiled, typing back, "I'm ready to conquer everything." Because that's what happens when you stop being invisible. You don't just become seen, You become unforgettable. And the best part? This was just the beginning. The invisible daughter had become a force of nature, and the world was about to find out exactly what she was capable of. But that's a story for another day.